Hi everyone, and welcome to part one of Cyberpunk 2077 review. The aim is to split this into three parts and to really be a bit more thoughtful and really kind of address how we find the game and everything that kind of went around it in terms of the reaction. By now you've probably seen as much as you ever really want to see on the reaction, and we appreciate that, but we do want to weigh in with our 2 cents as we have been looking forward to this game for a long time. It's a genre that we both love and a developer that we have always loved, and so here you'll find there's somewhat of a defense of them, whilst at the same time some, I think, fair critiques as well. So let's get stuck straight in, and Sindri, you've played a lot more of it than I have, and how do you feel having played through it with all of the reaction and everything that happened, and not only that but also the promises that they made beforehand as well?
Yeah, so I definitely want to start this one off just by saying the reason why we sort of delayed this video a little bit as well is just because we really wanted to avoid that sort of emotional response that a lot of people seem to allow to cloud their judgment on games these days, and particularly with Cyberpunk. I think the vast majority of people took straight to the internet after having like a single bug and claimed that the game was broken and unplayable, and I just don't think that's true at all. I will admit as well, I should preface my side of this by saying I did actually have a game-breaking bug where I couldn't progress the main story, and ultimately I decided to just restart, and I was completely fine after that. So that just goes to show, like, I did have bugs, and obviously some of them definitely shouldn't have been here at launch, but for the most part I think it's no different to games like Skyrim, for example, that launched with a very large amount of bugs, which kind of add to the character, in my opinion, in some places. But I guess moving straight into stuff that are not really spoiler territory, just in terms of general like world vibe, I think they did pretty much nail it with Cyberpunk. It definitely fits that that sort of dystopian future that we sort of wanted to get out of this. Although I think we've talked about this off camera a little bit. It definitely doesn't quite live up to like Deus Ex, for example, in terms of lore and stuff like that. But it definitely stands on its own as like the first on hopefully like maybe a new series for CDPR to work on. Aside from that, I think a lot of the other things are definitely strong enough to start as like a sort of entry to the cyberpunk genre here.
Yeah, and look, on some of those points, expectations were high for a lot of reasons, and a lot of the people that are reacting the strongest are actually people that got pulled into it via for example, they had never played the Witcher games, or they only got in sort of late on with the Witcher 3 when it became a bit more popular, or when it had the Netflix series, and so they really had these massively high expectations. And a lot of these sort of gamers, maybe you're one of them listening at home, although I doubt it, a lot of these sort of gamers are what I call like the COD FIFA type gamer, which is they're not gamers, but they do play for entertainment those kind of basic AAA games. And for example, most of the COD games, which I am personally just not a massive fan of, you can see why people are, but I'm not. But I can see that they're generally pretty crisp in the final result. They release a game like every year, and it works. There's no general bugs on that especially not game-breaking bugs. There might not be fantastic storylines, some of them could be, but they're generally pretty solid games. And what CDPR were doing here was really trying to push boundaries with this game. I think they pushed boundaries with The Witcher 3 a very, very long way, and The Witcher 3 is probably the best game that was ever made, especially when you factor in the 2 DLCs, which are games unto themselves. Whereas this game, it was going to be hard to live up to expectations. You and I, we talked about it in previous videos, that our expectations were also really high, even though we were trying not to. So I think a lot of that is the fact that there was a lot of hype, a lot of people poured into it, and a game studio that in 3 releases had really set benchmarks. So I think that probably has gone against them. Not only that, but every time they delayed it earlier in 2020, expectation actually grew more, because people were waiting longer. They were expecting, alright, like we said as well, delaying it was a good thing. We actually weren't upset that they delayed it, as long as the end result was what it should have been. and I think CDPR would probably say the end result probably wasn't what it was supposed to be. But I think it is. There's a thing I want to address in a minute, but I also want to say, to your point on starting a new franchise, I think that's probably what's going to happen. Because even with all the issues and all the refunds that were given through like the PlayStation Store, I think it's still had over 13 million sales that haven't been refunded so far.
Yeah.
And that's just, in a month, not even, or just about a month now since it got released. So that's pretty fantastic. That's pretty special. And I also think that the first Witcher game, if you go back to it now, I know it was a long time ago, but if you go back to it now, it's pretty much unplayable as well. So I'm envisaging a point where we'll look back on this, after not just the PS5 and generation, but the next generation, when the third one eventually comes out, and we will look back and say, yeah, it's absolutely amazing, but that first one was unplayable.
Yeah, well, I think on that point, Cyberpunk is definitely a completely new thing for CDPR as a studio. In the past, obviously, with The Witcher, they have a lot of experience now with sort of like a fantasy third-person set RPG, whereas this is a complete sort of departure from what they were used to. They've gone from the third-person locked camera to now a first-person locked camera, and they've gone from that fantasy setting to a bustling futuristic city. And I think they've really, obviously it's no GTA 5 map in terms of size, I don't think, but it's definitely like they've started to aim for that ballpark, and I think they bit off a tiny bit more than they were ready to chew, but I think they've absolutely delivered on what you would sort of expect for a first in what may be a new franchise for them.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of customization of the main character, no game has really ever quite gone as far as this. I mean, there are games that have, for example, but that the character doesn't speak, or it's a more basic story element or whatever. And I can think of some RPGs where you can customize more, but they don't have much involvement really, other than being sort of active in terms of action because you're controlling them, but passive in terms of conversations or whatever. Whereas here, obviously, V is a really active character. Is the most active character. Is arguably the most important character in this universe during this time. And to then have this element of customization and still fit stories around it, and how it does change depending on your background. And I think this is something that's been criticized quite heavily, actually. Is that whatever background you choose, it doesn't make a difference. It absolutely does, and I haven't finished the game, but it absolutely does in a lot of story elements. They still have to tell the same story, more or less. They have to, but the point is that there's conversations that you have, there's characters that you meet and have different relationships with based on this background completely. And I look at one of our favourite game series in Mass Effect. You can choose 3 backgrounds for Shepard. Doesn't make any difference at all. None of the background choices there actually make much of a difference, apart from one conversation piece or a couple of small conversation pieces during, but the actual story relationships that you have don't change at all.
Yeah, in terms of background, that is a criticism I've seen quite a lot actually as well. And at first I was sort of in that camp. I thought that it wasn't changing anything besides a few dialogue options and I guess a bit of the flavor in your tutorial missions, but having played quite a lot of the game now, I finished the main story. I've done quite a lot of side content. I would definitely say I'm qualified to talk about this now. There does come a point in the game where a specific side quest will open up depending on your life path. So for the Street Kid one, somebody that you talk to only on the Street Kid path will eventually call you and you get to do a little mission for them later on. And obviously because of that, your relationship with them is completely different. And it makes it easier for you to get the reward you want from the mission. Same as with the corporate life path, for example, your boss will call you later on after you've, not to talk about the life path, like actual implications at the start of the story, but he'll call you back later on to sort of apologize for things that happened at the start and then offer you another mission in that way. And obviously that wouldn't come up, I don't think, if you were Street Kid or someone else. So I think a lot of the people who sort of talked about it and said it had no impact must not have played far enough to actually see those impacts fully span out, because it's sort of like dominoes really. It doesn't it won't impact heaps straight away, but as the game goes on there will be a lot more dialogue options that you will have chosen and these unique missions that will have popped up specifically because of the life path that you chose. So I think a lot of people criticizing that just hadn't played enough, really, because I've played quite a lot now, and I've seen a lot more impacts of it than they would have mentioned in their criticisms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, the point of bringing it up in the first place really was also to talk about what CDPR were attempting to achieve. Have they achieved it? Not quite. But should we hold that against them? I don't think so. If they've made a very, very, very good game. I think this is a very good game. In the second part, we will do the normal review format as well, a bit more. But in terms of my general thoughts, and again, this is from someone that hasn't yet completed the game, but has probably done 25 hours or so. In terms of just getting immersed in everything, it's probably going to be somewhere between an 8 to a 9, and we're pretty harsh scorers. I think that's my impressions, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, the bugs are a downside. They're always going to be a downside. A lot of top games have bugs. Fortunately for a lot of those other games, they weren't game breaking, although occasionally they may have been. You mentioned Skyrim before, and that became a meme for it, and quite rightly so. Some of those bugs were really hilarious. Same with Grand Theft Auto. Some of those videos that you get of GTA fails and whatnot, a lot of them have bugs, and they're really quite funny, some of them. But it doesn't break the game. So far, I haven't had a game-breaking bug, which is lucky. But there have been some really funny, bits of graphics that I've seen, right, near the start when Adam Smasher walks into the lift after saying his thing. He seems to stand on, in an empty, there's no elevator in there, basically. It's just on thin air. That was
amazing.
That was hilarious. And obviously there's a bit where Jackie walks into a lift as well, but without the doors opening.
Straight through the
yet.
doors.
Yeah,
I've seen. I feel like the elevators are just the key to so many different bugs. The elevators and the cars seem to be the epicenter of a lot of these bugs, and it's amazing to see them.
A lot of the cars, car driving wise, sometimes the physics are really busted. I mean, I don't even mind some of that to a certain extent, even though it's definitely busted, because you can tell that it's just one line of coding will probably fix that.
Yeah.
The one that gets me is when somebody else is driving you, like Pan Am or whoever, and you're in the passenger seat, and obviously it's first person, so you're looking within the car, and the only way to get around this is, and I do this now, is I look out the passenger side window at the surroundings as we're driving, because when they're turning around corners or whatever, you see them going nuts on the wheel, or turning really late, but somehow they are amazing drivers, like Michael Schumacher or Lewis Hamilton, and yet when I leave it that long to brake and turn, and I'm going straight into the wall. So the way around that though is simply just to direct V to look outside the passenger window and just look at the surroundings. You can still engage in the conversation. It's fine. You don't miss much. So, but yeah, there's a few things. But I mean, these are games. There's always stuff in games, and this is why I'm not as upset or cut up about this as what people are. I think people have joined on a bandwagon. And it sort of reminds me of the old Harambe memes from a few years ago. Is that it sort of becomes this thing that you almost a lot of the times you go into YouTube videos that are talking about the game, and you see these comments, and you think half of the people that are making these comments probably haven't even played the game. They're jumping on the meme bandwagon and look at me, I'm cool, I've got the cool opinion. And those are the sort of people that I think I said to you, I'm actually in some ways, as a geek for this kind of stuff and a fan for this kind of stuff, I'm actually not upset that some of these people that have come in from other sources and the whole COD FIFA gamers that I talked about are going to slowly fall away again, because it means that as this game continues to have a lifespan, which it sure will, and I'm sure there'll be DLCs like Witcher had over the next little while as well, the community will become the people that actually enjoy it for what it is. Which I'm looking forward to. And again, if you're looking for a really good YouTuber who for both Witcher and now it looks like Cyberpunk content, there's a guy called X Letalis, who I really, really like. I don't know if you've watched many of his videos. I really, really like him. I think he's Bulgarian or Eastern European or something. I could be completely being offensive, but anyway, he's definitely got that Eastern European twang to his accent, and he makes really, really good content.
Yeah, I've definitely watched a lot of his, so yeah, can recommend as well. And in the meantime, before some patches and DLC come out for Cyberpunk, we're going to continue playing through it, and hopefully we'll come with a part 2 here, doing our normal review style with a proper, scoring and everything. And then potentially even more so in the future for a part 3, we might be reviewing the whole game, post DLC launch and everything like that. So
yeah, well, I just want to address one thing real quick as sort of like an addendum to this video. It won't take long at all. I'm going to put a link in the description, but obviously a lot of people, not just YouTube comments, but YouTubers and mainstream channels and websites and whatnot, are jumping on this bandwagon to crack onto CDPR, and they're almost treating them like the new Peter Molyneux, which a lot of his treatment was, some of it was fair, some of it was not fair. The CDPR stuff I think is not fair, but there you go. There's an article here on CBR.com called Cyberpunk 2077. No, can't talk today. Cyberpunk 2077. Broken Promises End CD Projekt Red. End CD Projekt Red. So they're talking about how CDPR are going to disappear because of this, which is ridiculous. Like 13 million sales already after refunds. They're not ending anytime soon. So this is a 9-slide little clickbait thing, but I just wanted to address it because some of these points, are worth. This is what people are talking about. So slide 1. CDPR made a lot of promises over the years regarding Cyberpunk 2077. Slide 2, failure to hold up to these promises has both gamers and developers questioning the company's integrity. What developers? I mean, what are you talking about with developers? Because they are a developer. So I don't understand what they're talking about. Their competitors are saying that, because they've got no vested interest in saying that at all, have they? I would say the more people of my competitors that try and question my integrity means the better job that I'm doing. But there you go. Most gamers, I'd say, are not questioning their integrity at all. They might be frustrated at bugs, but they're not questioning integrity. Anyway, we'll move on. So they say here that it was originally touted as a role-playing game, but its vision then evolved to an open-world action-adventure. And you tell me, is this a role-playing game?
Yup.
It absolutely is, isn't it? Because it ticks every single box of an RPG.
And that's exactly what CDPR were advertising it as from day one. They never pretended it wasn't. I think even in some of the interviews before the game came out, people were talking about the shooting, and CDPR were constantly saying it's more about the role playing than the other aspects of the game. So
yes, which it is, which it absolutely is. In every single way, it's a role playing game, and how you know that is, okay, what's an open world action adventure? I'm thinking Spider-Man, PS4. I'm thinking Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, most of the Rockstar games, right? These kinds of open world, maybe Watch Dogs counts as an open world action adventure.
Yeah.
Maybe the old Assassin's Creed sort of count like that. And you have a set path. These are the missions that you have to do. There might be some side missions. You might have a bit of flexibility about how you get from A to B, but ultimately that's what you have to do. Whereas these ones, this game, you make one certain choice or have a conversation option, and it means that you don't get a certain mission, or you get a different mission, or whatever it is. So it's absolutely an RPG. So there's a broken promise that they're saying, but it actually wasn't broken. So I just want to say that. Now here we go. The team promised a day-night cycle that would give NPCs unique habits and dialogue options. Well, there's definitely a day-night cycle, and there are definitely different things that happen during that time, but the NPCs do need a bit of work. That's fair. What would you think to that?
Yeah, it's 1/3 of their statement is accurate, and the other 2/3 are already in the game. Yeah, there is a day-night cycle. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does actually change the quantity of of the fully side NPCs, so not the ones you can have dialogue with, just the ones that walk around on the streets and whatnot. During the night, I'm pretty sure there's less in certain neighborhoods, and maybe more in some of the more seedy neighborhoods and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess,
for example, the markets change.
Yeah.
The Blossom Market, or whatever it's called, that changes, and the area. And I don't know what it's called in the game, but I seem to always end up there, and it's oh, I'm here. Where it's I guess it looks like a Chinese temple in the middle of a sort of a roundabout. And it's very close to markets and a lot of other areas. It's near, it's in Watson. It's right near the start.
yeah,
Um,
like Jig Street and that.
yeah, that's right. So even Jig Street, like both of those are two areas that are pretty close. Like they do change depending on the time of day as well. But honestly, the NPCs are a bit of a disappointment when you factor in the NPCs from like Red Dead 2, for example. That is a fair critique, but I think that, you know, it was a lot to process. Like the Witcher games would never have had that many NPCs because it is in a fantasy environment and there was a lot smaller of a population. And you know, you're talking about villages.
Well, spread out over a horizontal plane rather than like all the vertical nature of Cyberpunk as well. Like it's not just you know, it's not just like a lot of NPCs over a large amount of area. It's like a lot of NPCs squished into a very small area because it's like a city instead. So yeah, definitely like a little disappointing, but it's exactly kind of as expected, really, with CDPR sort of doing such a departure from what they're used to with The Witcher.
I think this is also something that you'd see, and we've got to judge it obviously on this game alone, but this is something that you would see, I think, improve in subsequent, you know, releases, I would say.
Yeah.
In the next slide, they say they also promised a game that would work on both next and last generation consoles. Well, the game does work on PS4. I mean, there are a lot of issues. Like they're showing a picture here of like an NPC that you're talking to that is very, very pixelated, and that has happened to me quite a few times. But you know, you're talking about power. You're not talking. You know, what they made it for was for the next generation. Absolutely, and for PC, and they released it for PS4 and Xbox One, basically as not an afterthought, but as like a, well, we better still do that, and that's a fair point. But it's not. I mean, I can handle a few pixelated things every now and then. That happens on a lot of games. That happens on some of the biggest releases I've ever seen. Like, you know, so I'm not fussed about that. It's not every single time. It's one in, you know, 5 that you go up to an NPC, which is still a lot, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, but that's just their rendering engine, isn't it? So
That's
like
right.
after it happens even on high-end PCs or on the new consoles. Like sometimes they'll be rendering in as you come up, and then it'll like finish rendering as you're talking to them. Like I guess it should be more hidden or more streamlined or faster or whatever, but it's not just on last gen consoles. That happens on everything. So
That's right, and you think about the rendering that's got to do and how much like is into it. Like you think of all the different neon colors, and different things going on. Like it's a lot. So I don't hold that against them. The next point they've made is that the hacking in the game is much more limited compared to the earlier previews. I don't really do the hacking in the game at all. I haven't chosen like to go down that path much, so I couldn't really tell you. But what do you think?
I didn't do it at first, but later on, once I had a lot more money to burn, I started buying a lot more of the hacks, and I upgraded like my RAM deck or whatever, so I could do like literally like 7 or 8 hacks strung together without like without running out of the RAM. And yeah, it's completely fine. Like there are some hacks you can get later on where you can literally just like knock people out instantly. It like shuts down all of their like cyberware or whatever, and they just fall over unconscious. It's like an instant kill basically. It's ridiculous. Like hacking is busted. It's completely fine. It's just bad early because you need money to like purchase a lot of the hacks or to upgrade your RAM so you can actually use them.
That doesn't sound too bad. I mean,
it's absolutely fine. Yeah, I honestly think it's busted once you get to it. It's just you can't use it very early on because if you could, the game would be like a ridiculous joke.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a massive, I'm not the hugest fan of hacking in games anyway.
No, I never really thought about it until I had so much money to burn that I was like, yeah, I might as well test some of them out, and I ended up seeing how ridiculously busted they are. Like, it literally gets to the point where you can kill like the skull enemies with your hacks and never like approach them at all. Basically, it's pretty unbelievable. Pretty much exactly what I expected when they showed the hacking in like the demos and whatnot. Like they showed you could like detonate their grenades on their person and do other stuff like that. It's exactly what I expected.
Yeah, so that's fine. Maybe there's a small point in there, or maybe it's just someone that's not that far into the game to really.
Yeah, definitely early on. Like there's not as many low level hacks as you would like. Like a lot of them are just like you can ping to see enemies through walls. You can like turn off their eyes for like 5 seconds. Like there's nothing too crazy early on, but definitely like if you work for it later on, you can get some ridiculous hacks.
Yeah. All right. Next point. Police have been known to spawn and start shooting even at unwitnessed crimes.
Yep.
Well, I haven't noticed it at unwitnessed crimes so far, but I would really say that I'd find it hard to believe that they were completely unwitnessed in a city like Night City.
That's true. With cameras. And
so exactly.
Active,
Exactly. So maybe if you're out in the boonies, and you're in the middle of like a small little bit of desert, and there's obviously no one else around, that's a bit different.
Yeah.
Especially the spawning. The police spawning is one that is interesting. Like, again, maybe it's a rendering issue, or there's something else issue, but it may look like they're spawning. But again, we know that they could be, in all these buildings, right? There could be all kinds of things that the police are already in there. You know what I mean? It's like it might not be spawning. It might just be the way that the game hasn't coded it to look great. But police could be knocking about. Like, you imagine an actual Night City, like an actual Cyberpunk city. Like, police could be there could be police in every single building because they're so big and huge.
Yeah, I'm definitely. This is like the one point on this that I definitely agree with. I think the police were handled pretty bad.
I agree. I do agree.
And I think the worst part is at the start of the game they set up like when you're driving back through like the like back home with Jackie after your very very first mission with him, getting like Sandra Dorset or whatever. They set up max tac as like this big thing. Like as you're driving up, there's like the people in the car. And like the max tac like flying vehicle like flies down and the two guys jump out, and they're from the very original Cyberpunk trailer where it's like that woman in the street. And those guys have like the one-handed shotguns that shoot like 60 bullets or whatever. They set that up very early on, but no matter how high your stars get, that's not going to come after you. Like it's almost like they planned for that to be the final like star rating. Like once you get to like 5 stars or whatever, the max tac would like fly after you, but it just doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing about the police in this game is that you need to realize that it's not the people that are talking about the police generally are talking about it from the Grand Theft Auto background. If you come from the Witcher background, you'll realize that like the guards back in the Witcher games were also pretty unkillable, no matter how strong you made Geralt. You could have a fully kitted out Geralt with everything, like maxed out, that's taken out. He's taken out the Wild Hunt, elves or whatnot, and he's doing all this crazy stuff, killing dragons. But like one guard has a skull above him, and you can't kill him. So that's the background that they're coming from, because they actually didn't make the game thinking about interacting with the police. It wasn't designed for that. It was just, you know what I mean? Whereas Grand Theft Auto, for example, they actually made the game to interact with them on a regular basis. That's kind of half the point of that game. So they couldn't make them unkillable in that game, because the point of the game is to obviously, do crimes. Like the name of the game is literally to steal a car. So as I said, in this one, I think it was more just they're there to stop you messing about, basically. Which is also bad, and I think they probably should review it. But if you come from the Witcher background, you'll understand this one, and it probably didn't come as a surprise. It didn't to me, anyway.
Yeah, I guess so. I definitely think probably needs a bit of work in the future, but for now, it's not. It's by far nowhere near the most pressing issue of the game.
Right. Well, and that's it. That's all they've got in terms of issues and broken promises. Which actually, when you come back down to it, first of all, that's not that many. It's not broken promises. It's just, I think, just issues. And you give me a game that's come out, especially these days, unfortunately, that's come out without issues. There's a couple of great, don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying some of the memes and some of the videos that are coming out.
For sure.
There was a good one like Cyberpunk 2077, but it was for PS1. That was quite a fun video to watch. And there's one also like Cyberpunk 2077, but it was released by EA. That was really good. So I don't know if you guys have seen that, but that's definitely worth searching up. Look, we can laugh at that, and to me, I think this builds the community as well. just to give you an example, like sometimes things that have problems, sometimes the problems are what makes it what it is, gives it the character. That certainly was the case for Skyrim as well. Like Skyrim was a great game, don't get me wrong, and only really surpassed as an RPG, if you ask me, until The Witcher 3 came out, and neither of which have been surpassed since. Those are still the top two, and Skyrim's been out for almost a year now. Almost a decade now, almost 10 years. So that says a lot. But it also got its character by being meme-worthy and bug-worthy. It absolutely did. Was it the giant? How the giant could fly into the air
into the sky,
yeah, that's right, which is just hilarious. So like they all have it, and this builds up part of the character. These are games. We need to understand these are games, right? These and games have coding. It's computer coding that do some of this stuff. So I think that a lot of the bugs we need to just chill out on. And if they're game breaking, some of them are really frustrating. Like, I got frustrated even on the heist at the very start, where you can go up to the rooftop and get the katana. There's another thing in that, like APV.
You just can't read it or whatever. Yeah.
There's not. Yeah, it just, you can't interact with it in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. It doesn't even tell you what it is.
It's also really difficult to get into the vehicle as well for some reason. Anytime you try to jump over the step, it climbs you all the way onto the top, and you can't just walk in.
That's right.
Yeah, it's pretty stupid.
Well, also because probably again because it wasn't designed for you to be able to go into that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. It is dumb, especially in light of there's a side mission that I've done later on in the game where you actually can get into an APV, and you're still not supposed to be able to, because it's for these two, like this. I don't know if you, without spoilers, there's a mission where there's a guy that's running for mayor, and the previous mayor had been killed.
Yeah.
So there's a point where you're talking to them outside their APV, and you can actually get in before the conversation's done.
Can you?
Yeah, because I thought that's what they wanted. That's why they were still standing out there. So in the middle of the conversation, I ran and kind of got in, and then one of them, one of the things, I have to make this point as well, if anyone's still listening to us, one of the things that I find great and also really, really annoying about Cyberpunk is that if you take too long to respond, these people are brutal when it comes to telling you to respond and do stuff. These people do not give you a break. Sometimes I've put the controller down to go and get a glass of water, and all I can hear in my headphones or whatever it is, let's get it together, B. Or whatever it is,
Yeah, it's always what is wrong with you, B? Dude, I'm just away from I'm
relax.
Hey, calm down.
So when I go into the APV, this guy that's running for mayor is like, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to go in there," or something like that.
Oh, they actually had dialogue.
It's hilarious. So, which I think is good, but also it's really annoying sometimes. But there's a lot of bugs. I'm not bothered by most of them so far that I've come across. Is it the game that I thought it was going to be? Probably not quite. Is it an amazing game? A fantastic artistic recreation of a cyberpunk sort of concrete playground? Absolutely. Are there a lot of good characters in it? Yes. Could it be better? Could there be some changes that would be made? Possibly, yeah. I probably would have offered a third person view as well.
Yeah.
I like first person for a lot of the stuff, but for some of it I really wish that it was third person. For example, when you're in a gunfight or a katana sword fight, it would be really nice to be able to see what my guy's doing, and if I'm crouching, sometimes I don't know whether I'm crouching or not, and that's really bugged me. But I guess, as I said, I think that when we do our part 2, I'm just predicting, I haven't scored it at all yet. As we said at the start, we're trying to take our time, but I feel like this is going to end up still somewhere in the sort of 8 to 9 range, I feel like. And then we'll do a part 3 as and when final patches have been done and the game's kind of more finalized, and also when DLC, which I think will almost definitely happen for this, when DLC is coming out, because that will then complete the game further. So there'll be a part 2 coming up soon. I guess, do you have anything that you want to add before we sign off?
No, I think we've sort of covered all of my initial thoughts. I think the rest will sort of come out in the part 2, where we talk about the individual segments of the game, and where it sort of does well and where it sort of maybe falls a bit short. But as you say, I definitely think within the next like few months, especially after DLC starts getting released, this game's definitely gonna rise straight up to like a 9 or an 8 for sure. Like it's gonna sit right there, and people are gonna feel a little stupid for hopping on a bandwagon against it. I'm 100% certain about that.
Oh, good. Let the CODers go back to COD as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Fine by me. All right. Well, let us know what you think, guys, in the comments below, and obviously post any memes or any cool videos that you know of on this one as well.
Yeah, feel free to link us more.
We are still
videos.
enjoying that part
missed
too.
that.
Yeah. Yes.
I missed that from the Skyrim days. I'm honestly happy that this game has some glitches. It's the best part.
Well, what we know is it's going to let this game live on forever, so that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
Alright, I guess until then, get it together, V, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time, guys.